Moving on. All right. KP the Patriot. What's up?
Hello. Okay, there are so many things I wish I could have added to some of these things, but number one, thank you for letting me ask a question. So something you can call me uneducated if you want to, but the amount of
I
political
don't read
affiliate.
anything bigger than that. So if that's even a little too big, so you can say you're uneducated. I'm pretty simple minded.
Okay, all right. So to me, the amount of political affiliations is like the gender spectrum. Like there are so many of them. Well, the gender spectrum. And I am not sure what paleoconservatism is. So I don't know if anybody on here is a paleo. I've been told that they believe in a theocracy, which I disagree with because I think separation of church and state. But I don't know if that's true. So if anybody on here is a paleoconservative, or if anybody knows what that is, I would love it if you could explain that to me, because I am uneducated in that aspect.
Ooh.
Yeah, I could take this question. I'm a
Yeah, I was about to
paleoconservative.
say we have King Paleo Conservative himself in the
All right, let's
Well,
hear it.
so there's actually a little bit of history involved, which is you kind of have to go back to like where modern conservatism originates in America, which is in the aftermath of World War II.
I'm gonna empty my spirit and nobody kill each other.
What's that? Oh, okay.
I'm gonna empty
Yes.
my
So
spirit and nobody
Right.
kill each other.
So after World War II, you have the real emergence of kind of like two conservative traditions.
Mhm.
And this culminates in the creation of the National Review and the John Birch Society. And so this is where a lot of this begins. I'm going to try and simplify it so I can answer the question in an expeditious way. But if you really want to understand the roots for this, that's where you have to look, is John Birch versus National Review. And long story short, on the John Birch side and on this more old right kind of spectrum, you've got people that believe that America is a nation of people, of land, this kind of thing. And National Review is really where you see the beginning of this liberal strain of conservatism that, well,
Okay.
actually, conservatism is about classical liberalism. It's about free markets. It's about small government and so on. So the John Birchers all got ostracized out of the conservative movement.
Okay.
William F. Buckley fired them from the magazine. He totally kicked them out of the conservative movement. This happened in the 50s and 60s. You had another instance of this conflict in the 1980s and the 1990s. This was the advent of the neocons and the paleocons. And so the neocons, the origin of the neoconservatives is these guys were Trotskyites. They were actually leftists in the
Okay.
1950s and 60s. But what happened in the 1970s is that there was a war between Israel and Palestine, of course.
Mhm.
And the Soviet Union was backing the Palestinians, and the United States, Richard Nixon, he saved the Israelis. And so
Right.
those Trotskyites, those old leftists, said, well, hey, wait a second. We're pro Israel. A lot of them were Jewish, by the way.
Right.
Trotsky was Jewish. His name was Lev
Mhm.
Bronstein. They said, well, we want to protect Israel. We see the Jewish national interest. So we are leftists, but we're going to become cold warriors. We're going to become war hawks. We need to take down the Soviet Union. This is where you get this very hawkish, this combination of sort of left-wing cultural, social, and political ideology, but with a hawkish foreign policy. So in the 1980s and the 1990s, there was a big conflict between people like Bill Kristol and like William. Well, he kind of originated here. William F. Buckley, all these characters, and they basically exiled all the paleocons like Pat Buchanan, Sam Francis, and so on, who were in some cases writing for National Review or were just on the scene, who were far more socially conservative than they were free market people, or they were cold warriors or anything like that. So that was really the genesis of the conflict. But the reason, I'm oversimplifying a lot of that, but the reason I bring it up is because what I'm trying to say is the people that have inherited conservatism in the past 40 years have been the neocons. The people that
Right.
have taken over and defined conservatism are people that are in favor of free markets and small government and low taxes and foreign wars. And the people that have been buried essentially, ostracized from the movement and forgotten by history and not venerated, and their books are out of print, are the social conservatives, the paleocons, people like Pat Buchanan and all the rest, who said that what conservatism really means is actually it's more about maintaining the social fabric. It's actually more about order. It's actually about having a stable, predictable, safe country than it is about creative destruction and hyper capitalism and all this. And so the reason that people don't know about it is because the conservatives throughout the post-war era in America have been constantly firing, blacklisting, ostracizing, and all the rest to the Paleocons. But that is a legitimate, valid form of conservatism that was fighting against the modern interpretation for 70 years. And
Mhm.
Paleocons define themselves as being anti-war. We want to, if you read Pat Buchanan, he wants to make America a republic, not an empire. We want to stop immigration. We want to rebuild the family, and the family being one man, one woman, right? A mother and a father and lots of children. And so it's really defined by its social conservatism more than it is those other aspects.
Okay. So that makes sense. That gives me a better picture of it. So I guess like another question I have is, do paleoconservatives believe in the separation of church and state, that the church, I mean, sorry, that the government shouldn't be telling what the church and like different religions to do and the church shouldn't be involved in the government? Do they believe in that, or do they believe in a theocracy?
Well, I hear this a lot, and I've heard this a lot in the Zoom calls about this separation of church and state. And honestly, this is like one of the most misunderstood doctrines in American history. People think that, well, number one, the separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. It's not in the Declaration of
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Independence.
Yeah.
This was in like a letter, but the point of the origins of that was so that the government would not be married to the church, and then actually corrupting the church was the problem.
Right.
What people interpret it now to mean is that if you are a legislator and you're informed by your religion, then that is somehow wrong. Or, the government
Right.
might have prayer in public schools, but none of these things really violate the separation of church and state. It's talking about institutionally the separation of the institution of a church and the institution of government. But it doesn't mean that if you're a Christian that you're not going to legislate based on your morality, because of course all law is informed by morality. Every
Right.
decision, our entire worldview is informed by our religious beliefs. So, for example, like when I look at something like abortion, I think abortion should be illegal because it's immoral. When I look at gay
Right.
marriage, I think you should not have it because that's not marriage to me. Marriage to me is between one man and one woman. A lot
Right.
of people, like libertarians and classical liberals and neocons, will say, well, we have a separation of church and state. Marriage is now a state or a secular institution. So, to inform our religious, to have our law informed by religious beliefs on that is theocracy. But I disagree. So it's not that we want theocracy is when church is the government, when the religious
Right.
authorities are the state government. We don't want that. We just want our laws to reflect our morality, and specifically the
Yeah.
historic Christian morality of America.
Yeah. And right, going back to what you said about like the gay marriage and everything, and how people say that like it's a theocracy. One of like the biggest things that I am concerned with, or that I find interesting, and worry about, is that the fact that some people think that it should be mandatory for a priest or a minister to wed a same-sex couple. Because personally,
No, I'm gay, and I
I
do
disagree with same-sex marriage. I mean, it doesn't affect me, and I have no problem saying that because it's my beliefs and it's my faith, and I'm proud of it. But I do not think that any religious leader should be forced to wed a gay couple if it goes against their religious beliefs, because you're asking them to put their morals to the side, and that's why I like the separation of church and state. But that's one thing that's like concerning whenever people are saying that we shouldn't have a separation of church and state.
I, as like a gay man, completely agree with the fact that we should never force some
Yeah.
like a priest or a pastor or any religious figure to marry, because that goes against everything
Right.
I'm personally for. I believe marriage in the legality sense is just letting the state know that you're like more like committing your life to each other. But in religious, um, in Christianity, it means a whole lot more. It's a lot deeper. It's
Right.
and gay marriage just is not a part of Christianity. It ever has been, and it isn't right now. So I just don't see the reason that people are trying to force pastors and priests
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, like, I don't think the government should have a say in who can get married to who, but I also don't I don't think that, the government should also have a say in, like, what priests and religious figures are supposed to do in the church either.
Mhm.
I would say so. This is what I did. You hear a bunch of opinions, and I'm not discrediting anyone else's opinion. You say you're not really well educated. I wasn't either. Do your own research and then formulate your own opinion. Now,
Oh, yeah,
most
no, I'm, like, well-rounded on most things, but the whole political spectrum, it's like there's a million and one of political affiliations, I don't know what the hell they are. So, I know, like, the basic ones, but I just wanted to ask about paleoconservatism because I had no clue what
yeah.
that was.
I mean, if I think you might, do you think that you like a lot? Your faith leads to a lot of decisions you make politically?
No, when it comes to abortion, that's part of it, but most of it it's not so much my faith, it's so much the research that I've done. And yeah, because I mean, I haven't been raised in a very political household, so I formulated my opinions myself by research, not by my faith.
Mhm. I mean, I guess I do a little bit of both, but at the end of the day, my faith takes over my research. You know what I mean? And if they
Oh
align,
yeah.
they align. But yeah, so that was a good question to have someone completely explain define paleoconservatism.
Thank you for answering my question. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no problem.